It was a quiet Friday evening, the kind where the silence wraps around you like a warm blanket. My parents were out of town for the weekend, and I was home alone, relishing the solitude. I had just settled on the couch with a bowl of popcorn and my favorite horror movie when my phone buzzed on the coffee table. I picked it up, glancing at the screen. It was a text from my brother, Tom. We were close, despite the 4-year age gap. He'd left for college a year ago but came home often enough to keep in touch. "Hey, Sarah. Can you meet me at the clearing in the woods? Need to show you something." I frowned. The woods behind our house were dense and rarely frequented, especially at night. It wasn't like Tom to ask something so strange. I texted back quickly. "What's up? Why the woods?" His reply came almost instantly. "Just trust me. It's important." Against my better judgment, I decided to go. I grabbed a flashlight and a jacket and stepped into the cool night air. The walk to the woods was short but unnerving. The moon was just a sliver, offering little light, and the trees cast long, eerie shadows. As I entered the woods, the familiar path to the clearing felt foreign and menacing. Every snap of a twig or rustle of leaves set my nerves on edge. I reached the clearing and looked around, my flashlight casting an uncertain glow. "Tom." I called out, my voice sounding small in the vast darkness. There was no response. I waited for a few minutes, the silence pressing in on me. I pulled out my phone to text him again, but before I could type, a new message appeared. It was a photo of me, taken from behind. My breath caught in my throat. The realization that someone was watching me, someone close enough to take a picture, sent a chill down my spine. I spun around, my flashlight beam darting through the trees, but saw nothing. My heart raced as I texted back, my hands trembling. "This isn't funny, Tom. Where are you?" No reply. Panic started to set in. I decided to head back home, every instinct screaming at me to get out of the woods. As I walked quickly back through the trees, I kept glancing over my shoulder, half expecting to see someone lurking in the shadows. Just as I reached the edge of the woods, my phone buzzed again. Another message from Tom. "Too late." I froze, my heart pounding in my ears. What did that mean? I looked around frantically, but the night was impenetrable. Gathering my courage, I bolted for the house, slamming the door behind me and locking it. I leaned against the door, trying to catch my breath. I dialed Tom's number, but it went straight to voicemail. Desperation clawed at me as I called again and again, each unanswered ring tightening the knot of fear in my chest. I called the police next, trying to keep my voice steady as I explained the situation. They assured me they would send someone to check the woods and our house. In the meantime, I was to stay inside, doors locked. The waiting was agony. I paced the living room, peering out the windows, jumping at every creak and groan of the old house. After what felt like an eternity, I saw the flash of police lights outside. 2 officers came to the door, and I let them in, my relief palpable. They searched the woods and the house thoroughly but found no sign of Tom or anyone else. They did find footprints in the clearing, which they said they would investigate further. I tried to explain the texts and the photo, but without more evidence, there wasn't much they could do immediately. One of the officers, a kind-faced woman named Officer Martinez, stayed with me until my parents could be reached and began their journey home. She made me some tea and tried to reassure me, but the fear gnawed at me, relentless. As the hours dragged on, there was still no word from Tom. My parents arrived early the next morning, their faces pale with worry. We sat in the living room, the police still present, trying to piece together what had happened. Then, my phone buzzed again. I hesitated before looking at it, dread pooling in my stomach. Another message from Tom. "Come to the basement." My blood ran cold. The basement was a place we rarely used, filled with old boxes and forgotten memories. I showed the message to Officer Martinez, who immediately instructed everyone to stay put as she and another officer went to check it out. Minutes later, they returned, their faces grim. "There's no one in the basement," Officer Martinez said. "But we found this." She held up a piece of paper, dirty and crumpled. It was a note in Tom's handwriting, "Help me." Tears welled up in my eyes. What was happening? Where was my brother? The police increased their efforts, searching the woods again and expanding their investigation. Days turned into weeks with no sign of Tom. The only contact I had were those chilling messages, each more cryptic and sinister than the last. "Why didn't you come? You should have listened. It's your fault." I was living in a nightmare, haunted by the messages and the loss of my brother. My parents were distraught, their grief a constant presence in our home. The police continued their search, but hope was fading. One night, as I lay in bed, my phone buzzed again. With trembling hands, I opened the message. This time, it was a video. It showed the clearing in the woods, the camera moving slowly, deliberately. It stopped at a tree, zooming in on something carved into the bark. "Help me, Tom." The camera lingered on the carving, then panned down to the ground, showing a freshly dug hole. My heart pounded in my chest as I watched, horror consuming me. The video ended abruptly, and another message followed. "Come alone." I knew it was a trap, but I couldn't ignore it. I had to try to find my brother. I grabbed my flashlight and a kitchen knife, my hands shaking. I left a note for my parents, telling them where I was going, and slipped out of the house. The night was eerily quiet as I made my way to the woods. The path seemed longer, more menacing than before. When I reached the clearing, I shone my flashlight around, my breath visible in the cold night air. "Tom." I called out, my voice breaking. Silence. I moved towards the tree with the carving, my heart in my throat. The hole was still there, but it was empty. Panic surged through me as I realized I was being watched. I spun around, shining my flashlight frantically, but saw nothing. Then, out of the darkness, a figure emerged. It wasn't Tom. It was a man, his face obscured by a hood, his eyes glinting with malice. "Who are you?" I demanded, trying to keep my voice steady. The man chuckled, a low, sinister sound. "I've been waiting for you, Sarah." Fear paralyzed me. How did he know my name? What had he done to Tom? "Where's my brother?" I shouted, gripping the knife tighter. "He's gone," the man said, stepping closer. "And soon, you will be too." I backed away, my heart pounding. "Stay away from me." He lunged at me, and I slashed with the knife, catching him on the arm. He hissed in pain but didn't stop. I turned and ran, my only thought to get back to the house, to safety. I could hear him behind me, his footsteps fast and relentless. I burst out of the woods, the house in sight. My parents were on the porch, having found my note. They shouted my name, and I screamed for them to call the police. The man stopped at the edge of the woods, watching as I ran to my parents. His eyes met mine, and I knew this wasn't over. He would come back for me. The police arrived quickly, but the man had vanished. They searched the woods and found the carving and the hole, but no other clues. The investigation continued, but Tom was never found. The messages stopped, but the fear never left me. The man's face haunted my dreams, and every shadow seemed to hide a threat. I knew he was still out there, waiting for his next chance. It all started with boredom. As a teenager with too much time on my hands, I was always on the lookout for new games to play. The usual suspects, Steam, Epic Games, had started to feel stale. That's when I stumbled upon an obscure forum post about a game that promised an unforgettable experience. The link led me to a shady website. It was poorly designed, riddled with pop-ups and broken links, but there was something about it that piqued my curiosity. The game was called Deep End. It had no description, no reviews, just a download link. Against my better judgment, I clicked it. The download was quick, almost too quick, and the game installed itself without any prompts. The icon on my desktop was a simple black square. I double-clicked it, my screen flickering before the title screen appeared. There were no options, no settings, just a single button that said, Play. I clicked it. The screen went black for a moment, then a message appeared in white text, Welcome to the Deep End. Are you ready to dive? I pressed enter, and the game began. At first, it seemed like a typical horror game. I controlled a character in a dimly lit maze, the sound of dripping water echoing through my headphones. The graphics were basic, but the atmosphere was unsettling. As I navigated through the maze, I started to notice odd things, distorted shadows, whispers that seemed to come from nowhere. Then, the game took a turn. My character entered a room filled with old computers, their screens flashing with random code. A prompt appeared, Access the network. I hit enter, and the screen went black again. When it came back, I wasn't in the game anymore. I was staring at my desktop, but it was different. The background was a solid black, and new icons had appeared. One of them was labeled Dark Web Access. My heart pounded in my chest. This wasn't part of the game, this was something else entirely. Curiosity got the better of me. I clicked on the icon, and a command prompt opened, filling my screen with a cascade of code. A new window popped up, displaying a dark web browser. I knew I should have closed it right then, but I didn't. The browser opened to a marketplace. The listings were a nightmare, drugs, weapons, hitmen for hire. I was about to shut it down when a chat window opened. The message was simple, Welcome to the Deep End. Are you ready to dive deeper? Before I could respond, another message appeared, Follow the instructions, or there will be consequences. Panic set in. I tried to close the window, but my mouse was unresponsive. The keyboard didn't work either. It was as if the computer had a mind of its own. The chat window flickered, and a new message appeared, Check your phone. I looked at my phone, my hands shaking. There was a new text from an unknown number, Open the drawer. I glanced at the drawer of my desk. The fear was almost paralyzing, but I reached for it anyway. Inside was a piece of paper I hadn't put there. It had a single word written on it, Obey. My phone buzzed again, Good. Now, go to the address listed below. An address appeared on my screen. It was close, too close. I had to know what was happening. I grabbed my jacket and slipped out of the house, the streets eerily silent as I walked to the address. It led me to an old, abandoned warehouse. The windows were boarded up, and the door hung loosely on its hinges. I hesitated at the entrance, the urge to turn back overwhelming. But I needed answers. I stepped inside, the darkness swallowing me whole. My phone buzzed again, lighting up the space with its harsh glow, downstairs. I found a staircase leading to the basement. Each step creaked under my weight, the air growing colder the deeper I went. At the bottom, there was a single door. I pushed it open, revealing a room filled with old computer equipment. Monitors lined the walls, their screens filled with static. In the center of the room was a single chair, facing a large monitor. My phone buzzed one last time, Sit. I sat down, the monitor flickering to life. A video feed appeared, showing a dark room with a single light illuminating a figure tied to a chair. My blood ran cold as I recognized the figure, it was me. A distorted voice filled the room, coming from the speakers above. Welcome to the Deep End. You've made it this far. Now, let's see if you can survive. The video feed changed, showing a timer counting down from 10 minutes. The voice continued, Find the key to escape, or suffer the consequences. Panic set in as I searched the room, the timer ticking away mercilessly. I rifled through drawers, knocked over equipment, but found nothing. The fear was suffocating, every second bringing me closer to whatever fate awaited. With only a minute left, I noticed a loose panel on the wall. I pried it open, revealing a small key. I grabbed it and ran to the door, unlocking it just as the timer hit 0. The door swung open, revealing a narrow hallway. I sprinted through it, the sound of my own breathing deafening in the silence. I burst out into the night, the cool air a stark contrast to the suffocating fear inside. I didn't stop running until I reached my house. I locked the door behind me, my heart pounding in my chest. My computer screen was still on, the dark web browser now closed. The only thing on the screen was a message: "Congratulations. You've survived the first dive." The browser and the game disappeared from my computer the next day. The icon, the files, everything was gone as if it had never been there. I reported the incident to the authorities, but there was little they could do. The dark web left no traces, and the warehouse was empty when they searched it. The old house on Elm Street had always been the subject of local legend. It was a small, dilapidated structure, abandoned for as long as anyone could remember. Most people avoided it, but for me, it represented a challenge, a mystery that begged to be solved. I never believed in the ghost stories and dark rumors that swirled around it. I was a skeptic, a man driven by logic and reason. That night, curiosity got the better of me. Armed with a flashlight and a crowbar, I made my way to the house, the chill of the autumn air biting at my skin. The moon was a thin crescent, casting a pale, eerie light over the overgrown yard. The house loomed before me, its windows dark and empty like the eyes of a skull. I pried open a window and climbed inside, my flashlight cutting through the thick darkness. The air was heavy with dust and the smell of mold. Cobwebs clung to the corners, and the floorboards creaked ominously under my weight. The house was small, only a few rooms, but it felt much larger in the oppressive silence. I moved cautiously, exploring each room in turn. The living room was filled with old, decaying furniture, the wallpaper peeling away in long strips. The kitchen was a mess of rusted appliances and broken cabinets. It was in the kitchen that I first noticed something strange, symbols etched into the walls, crude and unsettling. They looked like some kind of runes, though I couldn't decipher their meaning. As I studied the symbols, a sound caught my attention, a soft, rhythmic chanting coming from somewhere below. My heart skipped a beat. The stories of strange noises in the house suddenly didn't seem so far-fetched. I followed the sound to a small door in the hallway, hidden behind a tattered curtain. It led down to the basement. The steps were steep and narrow, the air growing colder as I descended. The chanting grew louder, more distinct, sending shivers down my spine. At the bottom of the stairs, I found another door, this one slightly ajar. I pushed it open and stepped inside, my flashlight illuminating the scene before me. The basement was small and cramped, the walls lined with shelves filled with strange, unidentifiable objects. In the center of the room stood a group of hooded figures, their faces hidden in shadow. They surrounded a makeshift altar, upon which lay a young woman, bound and gagged, her eyes wide with terror. My blood ran cold. This wasn't some ghost story or urban legend. This was real, and it was happening right in front of me. One of the hooded figures turned, his eyes locking onto mine. "Intruder," he hissed, his voice low and menacing. The others stopped their chanting and turned as well, their eyes glowing with a sinister light. Panic surged through me, and I stumbled back, my flashlight flickering. I had to get out, had to find help. But before I could move, the leader stepped forward, raising a hand to halt the others. "Wait," he said, his voice calm but commanding. "Let him see." He pulled back his hood, revealing a face twisted with malevolent glee. "You've stumbled upon something beyond your understanding," he said, his eyes gleaming. "And now, you will be part of it." He gestured to the others, who began to chant once more, their voices rising in a chilling crescendo. The symbols on the walls seemed to pulse with a dark energy, the air growing thick with a palpable sense of dread. I took a step back, my heart pounding in my chest. "What are you doing?" I demanded, my voice shaking. The leader smiled, a cold, cruel smile. "We are summoning the Dark One," he said simply. "And she," he gestured to the woman on the altar, "is the key. But it seems we now have an unexpected bonus." He raised his hands, and the chanting grew louder, more fervent. The symbols on the walls glowed with an eerie light, casting long shadows that seemed to move and writhe on their own. I felt a pull, a force drawing me towards the altar, and I struggled to resist, my mind screaming in terror. "Join us," the leader intoned, his voice echoing in the small, dark space. "Become one with the darkness." "No!" I shouted, my voice echoing off the walls. I turned and bolted up the stairs, my feet pounding against the wooden steps. I could hear the cultists behind me, their footsteps quick and determined. I reached the top of the stairs and slammed the door shut, my hands shaking as I fumbled with the lock. I had to get out, had to escape this nightmare. I raced through the house, my flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. The front door was just ahead, a beacon of hope in the midst of the terror. I burst through the door and into the night, the cold air a sharp contrast to the stifling basement. I ran, not daring to look back, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I didn't stop until I reached the edge of the yard, my heart pounding in my chest. From the safety of the trees, I looked back at the house. The windows were dark, the chanting silenced. It looked like any other abandoned house, but I knew the truth. I had seen the darkness within, and it had seen me. I stumbled back to my car, my mind reeling from the horrors I had witnessed. As I drove away, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had only just escaped with my life. The cult was still there, their dark rituals continuing in the shadows. I reported what I had seen to the police, but when they investigated, they found nothing. The basement was empty, the symbols gone. It was as if the house had swallowed the evidence, leaving no trace of the horrors that had occurred within its walls.